Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day wherever you're at and whenever you're watching this. We're going to be continuing on with this red tape series here with our next episode. This one is Burnt Offerings. This again is by the Exploring series, so as always, links will be down below in the description to the original video and playlist, actually, without my commentary interaction, and to the Exploring series channel. So yeah, if you enjoy this video and this series as we're going through it, please be sure to go over to the Exploring series, check out the originals, give them a like, give them a sub, give the man some support. Definitely deserves it. I've been enjoying the series quite a bit so far, especially the last episode, the like 2.5 hour long, which ended up with my reaction being, I think, close to 4 hour long video of Amoni, going into the origins of, the Church of the Broken God and the Mechanites, and a lot of kind of the ancient history and things between them, and some of the stuff going on with the ancient wars, which is what I've been asking for in a lot of my videos, wanting to learn about this stuff. As I've said numerous times, the kind of lore surrounding the Church of the Broken God, the Sarkics and the Davites, and that kind of like ancient history is just something that is very fascinating to me in the SCP universe, and it's one of the main things that kind of really drew me into the SCP Foundation stuff early on when I was first starting to get into the SCP videos. So very much been enjoying it so far, so I'm looking forward to continuing with this. So if you've been liking my videos that I've been putting out, be sure, consider hitting the like and the sub button. Lets me and the YouTube algorithm know that you're enjoying these videos and you want to see more. If you've been around the channel for a while and want to take your support to the next level, there's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube memberships that I offer. So take a look at that if you decide you want to take your support to the next level. So with all that said, let's get into the video. Again, this is Burnt Offerings and a Amoni Tale by the Exploring series.
Burnt Offerings.
Like his videos have been quiet.
Did Mechane lie beneath the shining city?
It seems like
this was a question that flittered about the outer quarters, its wings dipping and swooping between houses and markets.
One thing that I kind of thought about, but I didn't really talk about because there was so much in the last video. One of the origin stories, or the origin story, essentially, is that, three gods, Meccan, I would assume Yaldabaoth and the Scarlet King were the other two. They weren't mentioned, but they essentially were warring. They were basically equal with each other. None could defeat each other. They all seemed to have wounded each other, fell to earth. Meccan, fell or was discovered by a simple sheep herder, I think, and touched him and his wife, and then they were transformed. It makes me wonder, like, it's seemingly from the tale, they then took essentially the body of Meccan and created that city. But it honestly, it does, part of me kind of wonders, right? Like, was that really what Meccan wanted, or was that just what that person did with the body of Meccan? I get, like, you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to think of how I want to word it, right? Like, what was that actually Meccan's wish to do that, to impart its body to create this great city and become the basis for their technology, so they could defeat the Davite and Sarkic influences in the world and lead humanity to, a golden age of technology and science? Or did the like human influence and wanting to create something greater, because they were just like a sheep herder that had, seemingly nothing, was like the human influence of wanting to be greater, wanting to have like maybe their own great city or their own great empire? Was that just like exaggerated by the influence of Meccan, and then they almost kind of became like a parasite of Meccan, I guess, or almost kind of enslaved Meccan in a way by like using their body as, or its body as, the great city. I don't know. That's just something that I thought about when they were talking about that originally. But anyway, let's continue.
All believed in Mecane. None could doubt with their own eyes the gifts they had been given. The priests of the iron smoke shrines proclaimed her word daily, offering sacrifices rendered in copper and fulad scraps to the throne's treasuries.
It makes me wonder what Fulad actually is. It seems like it's some kind of alloy that Meccan has knowledge of creating that he imbued to them. Um, that is extremely durable, at least was in ancient times. But at the end of the story, there, obviously modern technology and weaponry, I guess I should say, modern weaponry, APCs, the shells from them were able to pierce the Fulad suits and damage the walls. It was only really the Great Colossus that kind of held the MTF teams back and pushed them back. So,
But was she there? Was she really beneath the earth? There were those who
that is also interesting too. Is in from previous Church of the Broken God stuff, I thought they depicted Meccan as a male god figure and Yaldabaoth as a female god figure. But in this story, they're depicting Meccan as a she, a female god. So I also do find that interesting as well. I wonder if in the the future parts of this we'll hear how they're depicting Yaldabaoth and the Scarlet King.
began to form the beginnings of a new doctrine. Had Mecane ever visited this world at all? Was she truly formed of metal and iron? Or was she a thing of spirit, an ideal form to which they were striving for? Was Fulad, too, impure? The priests did not know what to do with these new ideas. There were no formal doctrines concerning heresy. There had never been a reason. What need did they have to coerce their citizens when Mecane's gifts stood all around them?
True.
Many did not want to do anything. Their purpose was sacrifice and service, not theology.
That is also something that I talked a little bit about in the previous video too, is like with Meccan's influence, like it almost does seem like in certain ways, like free will, like a certain level of free will is kind of stripped away from the followers, right? Like, especially with the king having the power of the voice, essentially just being able to command. It makes me wonder, and again, I talked about this in the previous video, like, is it a situation where because, like, the emperor of the Mechanites, their leader, they believe he's the leader, so they believe that they should follow him. So is it like a belief thing? Like they believe that because he's their leader and when he gives them the command, they have to follow it kind of a situation? Or can that be like broken? That's a question that I have in this tale.
That was for the academics and thinkers in their vast skyscrapers, and they had little true authority. The church's power was the emperor, who had more pressing concerns. But others saw something else in this. What was this impurity but an obsession with spirit, with the impermeable, the immaterial? Many of them had served on the front lines. They had seen what spirits could do.
True, the
They
Dad Light
held
stuff.
divine scars to prove it. The rumors fluttered on, and the priests grew jealous of their flock.
It is also interesting, right? Too, like there's almost the three different perspectives of, I guess, evolution, you could say, are kind of like vying for supremacy between these three gods. You have Meccan that's about like evolution through technology. You have seemingly, I would assume, the Scarlet King with the Davites, right? And they're almost kind of evolution through magic thaumaturgy. And then you have the Sarkics, and they're kind of, I guess, evolution through like the primal drive, I guess. I don't know how to really describe their evolutionary theory other than maybe through conflict, survival of the fittest kind of a situation. I don't know. But it is kind of interesting that there's almost kind of like three different perspectives of, I guess, evolution, you could say. Um, and whoever were to win this kind of would drive how humanity would evolve moving forward, really.
Horticulture had not been a popular pursuit in a money ROM for many years. The war had gone on too long. Old soldiers did not want to come home only to see more greenery, more vines and shrubs lurking on their own land. So the gardens dried up, the parks were closed, and agriculture moved out to well beyond the city gates. Atham had been a gardener. He had lost his job, of course, and had found it difficult to use his skills for anything else. All he knew was plants, how to look after them, pruning and watering, shaping beds and lawns. So Atham withdrew from the world, living off a pittance from his clan. They preferred it that way. It would keep him quiet, keep him away. He tended his own little patch, making it green. He raised high bushes around the edge of his land, away from the other houses. Date palms loomed.
Isn't this the character that becomes Grand, becomes Ioun or whatever his name is, the Sarkic, like the Neo Sarkic leader? Maybe I'm mistaken. Could be thinking of something else, but like the name of this character sounds familiar. It could just be something from another SCP video that my brain just not putting together.
Over wooden fences, and the sun stopped at the house's walls. There was only a single house near him, a dozen or so yards away. The outer suburbs were a mess of rundown homes, abandoned junkyards, and blasted shrubland. The sands would frequently clog up the machinery, people's augments, everything. It was not a popular neighborhood, but the city expanded ever outwards, and not everyone could live in the high-rises. The house had been empty for many years when Farah turned up. She came alone one day, one of the interminable days, while Atham was in his garden. He saw her draw up in a thin car, a single bronze augment creeping halfway up her arm. Her hair was covered by a scarf. She was thin, in her 30s, and unsmiling. He didn't think much of her at first. He'd seen all sorts of people move into that house. Aging widows, broken soldiers, poets trying their hand at poverty. He ignored them all, withdrawing further and further inwards, barely leaving the house at all. But then he saw her garden, one morning on the way back from the market. There were no plants there, but she had placed a thing of iron. A twisted sculpture, reminiscent of a tree, but distinct from one, dominating the center of the plot. Around it were shrubs, bushes, wrought in steel and zinc. Each one was unique, and each contributed to the greater whole. Between them, the sand was curved into strange, precise lines. He walked over to the fence and leaned over it. "That's a beautiful garden," he said, thinking of nothing else to say. She stood up and smiled. "Thank you." The heresy spread further and further. What if Meccan was not beneath us? What if this was not the first ROM after all? Doubt was sowed in minds across the city, spreading, worming,
Hmm.
and twisting through the districts.
Interesting.
It reached the ears of the engineers.
Interesting, right? Like, if they're doubting belief that it's actually Meccan down there, then I guess question would be what is down there? And then what else would their belief lead them to? You know what I mean? Obviously, there's different splitter factions in the Church of the Broken God. So this could be a tale of how like some of those splinter factions got created. And maybe that's where this Atham guy, maybe he's actually one of the other church, like one of the splinter faction leaders, the Church of the Broken God. That may be what it is, because the name is definitely familiar. Um, but yeah, huh. Anyway, continue.
Up in their tall towers. They scoffed, publicly, but privately they all thought the same thing. Who had seen Mecane? The Emperor was their god's will, but who besides the Emperor had seen her? And it had been so long since the first Bumaro was on the throne. How carefully had the records really been kept? It reached the ears of the historians, who quaked and argued and lamented. Their records, though complete, were cryptic and vague. Many were firm, too firm, in their protests.
Hmm.
Of course, this was Mecane's rest. What else could it be? In their archives wrought from glittering foulard, they pored again and again over the archives. It reached the ears of the automata, who did not understand it, because they understood no command not directed from the throne. But they felt it, in some distant piece of programming, and they shuddered inside. It was a hard, cold idea, with implications beyond implications they could not conceive of. At last, it reached the ears of the Emperor. He considered it for a long time. Over many months, Atham and Farah became close.
Hmm.
They traded ideas on gardening, on technique. She was hesitant, predictably, to use plants in her garden, but he freely adapted
Understand
her
why.
sculptures in his own designs. He managed to barter a few scraps of foulard.
I wonder if, right? Well, I'm assuming this takes place later on in Amon after the church had reactivated and they teleported away from the battle against the Foundation, right? I'm assuming that's what this is. So you would think they would have taken the time to clear out any kind of Davite influence, plants and stuff that would have been left over. But I guess they could also be cautious and not wanting to, because like maybe they missed something, right? And so they start planting things, and then it could be vulnerable to some kind of Davite corruption that could release some kind of new plague on them or something like that. Who knows?
And wrought a twisted sculpture of a bird drinking from a fountain. He told her about his life, his career, his clan, his decline. She was more cagey. He found out she was a Luad, the largest of the clans from the northern district, with hundreds of cousins spread across its markets and roadways.
Interesting. So it sounds like the city is also split up into almost different factions, with like each district maybe being ruled by potentially a different house, a different family, a different religious sect, maybe. Huh. I wonder if this is going to lead to like almost kind of like a Mechanite civil war for control of the city, like that would be interesting.
But this was the South. He wondered if that was why she had come here. Sooner or later, they got into rhythms and patterns of their own. She would always start the morning with a boiled egg, bread, and coffee, that strange drink from the Empire's southern reaches. He started coming over before starting the day, chatting about the news, the weather. She, in her turn, would often lounge in his dining room each evening as he prepared dishes of chickpeas, flatbread, and spice from far distant archipelagos. The one benefit of living on the city's outskirts was the view. The sunset burnt, carving and cutting away into the desert, the heat rising from the daytime sand. They would sit in one garden or another and watch it. He'd cut down his high bushes, and the light flooded in, lapping at his crumbling walls. Then, one night, he saw something moving through her window. The Emperor was bored, because he was always bored. He had been bored for centuries.
Yeah, I can see that.
He could barely tell which Bumaro he was anymore.
Huh, that would be interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, right? The idea that how many lifetimes of memories had been stored and then like downloaded into him. Like, would that cause almost like a schism, like a multiple personality kind of situation in a person? Or would like the mech inside be able to, I guess, negotiate that, if that's the proper word? You know, keep that kind of under control and I guess relative. But I could also understand why he would be bored, right? Because like, there's a really what like they don't. I don't know. It doesn't seem like in this time presently they're at war with the Sarkics, the Davites. The Davites don't even exist in the time, you know, in the present now, in the Foundation present. And if he believes that Meccan is the city, there's no search for the broken god, right? So like what is there to really do? And I mean, with the technology that's, you know, the implants in him or whatever, who knows how long lived, you know, he would be. And also it makes me wonder, right, like would he be able to like even leave the city, right? Like is he, because of the technology keeping him alive, like eh, is it like powered by the city essentially, you know, as well? And so like if he got too far away, would his implants start to malfunction? Could he leave the city for a certain amount of time and, you know, the implants would power themselves for a certain amount of time, etc.? You know, I wonder how that works, because that would also be an interesting kind of idea, because then the city, you know, even though he is the emperor and has this great power and this, you know, I don't know how advanced the city would be in present time, but obviously it was. And I mean they have cold fusion, right? So it's still pretty advanced by even modern day standards. Because there's technology and things there that we don't understand. So, but like it's almost a prison to him then too. Like if he couldn't leave the city, then he wouldn't be able to go and explore the world, learn about what's happening in the world, you know, etc. Although I guess there was mention in the previous video that one of the Brahmaris, one of the emperors, had left and was visiting Egypt and the pharaohs there. I guess they were requesting aid for help against the abominate that was coming and to destroy Egypt, etc. So That would seem to indicate that they'd be able to leave the city for at least some periods of time, you know? So I don't know. Interesting thought, though.
They were all composites, interlocking mechanisms with only minor alterations. He sat on his throne, staring up at the riot of color on the ceiling. Craftsmen from across Africa and Asia had been employed in its design. It was timeless, supposedly. The augurs predicted that the remembrance of it would be ingrained and scattered to the wind, and that it would be millennia before a new empire, possessing only half a memory, would make a palace to compare. But the Emperor knew this was wrong, because that would mean Amoni Ram would fall, and it would never fall. He stretched upon his throne, idly, and considered heresy. It would provide a brief diversion. He should be angry. He could see in his mind, in the first Bumaro's memories, the face of Mekane. She gazed down upon him. She shone with pale light. She gave him a metal leg and carved the throne he sat on. Then she sank, slowly, into the sands, leaving only the foulard behind. It was true. He knew it was true. But he was not Bumaro.
So I wonder in this canon, right? Like, is Meccan just dead? You know, was Meccan mortally wounded? And the only the only way to continue her legacy was to essentially create the Meccan Empire, right? I wonder if that's what happened to the other gods as well. Like Yaldabaoth and Scarlet King essentially were mortally wounded. They essentially are dead, but they had enough power left that when they fell to Earth, they were able to pass their influence off to whatever bits of humanity were there, you know, where they fell, and thus their war continued through the influence of humanity, kind of a thing. And then it also makes me wonder, right? Like, again, as it's been established in various SCP canons, right? Belief in something creates something. So I wonder if that's potentially like the cycle of life and death of a god in the Foundation universe, you know? Gods can be killed and wounded, but if they can pass their influence on to some kind of mortal beings that can believe in them, that eventually that belief will spread enough to where they could potentially be resurrected, you know, when that belief reaches a certain level or whatever. So that's another interesting thought. Anyway.
Oh, he tried. They all tried. They drank each other's memories every day, trying harder and harder to align themselves with the imperial ideal. But he, and he alone, with his fist plugged into the endlessness of ancestry, knew that it could never be. There was too much there. Too much humanity. What had happened on that day in the sands? The memories looked like a mummer's stage, too perfect, too clean. Were they real? Were they imagined? Had they been placed there afterwards? How many centuries had passed? Why was it all so fragmented? The Emperor sighed again and signaled to a guard to fetch his generals. It would not do. The cult of the broken god functioned on the Emperor's power, and without the cult, there was just Foulad, and anyone could wield Foulad. None of them understood what it was to be an emperor.
That is also something that I wonder, right? Like, lot of resource that runs out, or is it an alloy that they can create? I think the preserver had mentioned that she could teach the Foundation how to make Fulad, right? In cooperation for them helping to reawaken the city. So I think it's potentially an alloy that can just be made. But if not, then obviously, it would be a finite resource that would be just made from the body of Meccan, right? And so then, yeah, how much of that would they really have? Anyway.
He wondered if the barbarian kings, his sworn Davite and Nalkan foes, were the only people in the world who could understand him. All reality was meant to emanate forward from his person, infusing everything, but it always felt the other way around, like the people had an iron grip on him, making him a tyrant or a saint in a strange dance with their true desires. His general arrived. His mask was silver and steel. The Emperor spoke a few words, and his spears slid forth. Farah was napping in a chair in his dining room, waiting for the meal to finish cooking. Atham was staring out of the window at the thing moving behind the light. It was large, shapeless. He couldn't properly make it out, but it was alive and moving, passing to and fro in the window. He grimaced and tightened his grip on the saucepan. He left by the front door and slowly, carefully made his way across to her house. The door was unlocked, but why wouldn't it be in an area as remote as this? He entered the kitchen and crept over to the hallway door. Slowly, he pushed it open. There was nothing on the other side, only a dark room with doors leading off it. Atham began to feel foolish. What if it was only nothing? Just a shade his feverish mind had... A clatter from upstairs. Atham swore beneath his breath. He held the pan aloft and walked up, trembling, until... A vine was there. A huge and powerful vine.
Uh-oh.
It was swaying, matching his movements. Other vines were creeping across the ceiling and turned in his direction as he moved upwards. A strange, low hissing could be heard.
That's no
Stop.
bueno.
Farah was standing at the top of the stairs, tears streaming down her cheeks. The vines let out an almighty hiss before diving downwards, smashing through the floor. Atham was knocked back, choking on dust. Brushing it out of his eyes, he leapt down and looked around.
I mean, it seems like what I'd said earlier has happened. They were planting some stuff. There seems to have still been some kind of Davide influence left in the city that they didn't clear out. And these vines took root in whatever she was doing. Yikers.
Farah was standing there, mercifully unhurt, her back to the wall, edging away from the huge, dark hole that had
Unless maybe she's actually kind of like a Davite spy or something. Yeah, who knows? That could also be the case.
sprung up in her carpet. The heresy had reached Atham as well. It reached everyone. He did not know what to think of it. It went against everything he was taught, but then he was a gardener. His very purpose was now against everything he'd been taught. The city shined with electricity. It heaved with Fulad, squeezing into the small places, extruding into the desert. It was like an open wound. But there were no open wounds, were there? One man's wound was another's perfection, a balm for the body, soothing the spirit through the sensation of metal on skin. Farah was, of course, a Davite. She was a Davite who liked to sculpt things out of metal and had been whipped for it. So she had fled at night and changed, and over long miles transformed from a Davite slave into Farah of the Luad.
Interesting.
But her vines, her little house spirits, she couldn't just let them go.
Huh. So she's a Davite slave who escaped and found freedom in Amon Aram. But it seems like, I don't know, maybe the practice of that Davite thaumaturgy is like literally like inherent almost. It's almost like a genetic thing that they have to do, right? It's not like something that they can just give up. It's interesting. So she could have unwittingly, accidentally, or I guess maybe unconsciously created these things without necessarily realizing it. Like she might have been consciously just wanted to do some gardening, but unconsciously or unknowingly may have created, these Davite vine weapons without necessarily realizing what she was doing, you know? Or maybe she did, who knows?
The two of them teetered on the edge of the hole, staring downwards. Farah shuddered. What if it goes on forever? Atham rubbed his chin. It was dark outside, but the lights glowed so strongly that you would hardly know. What if Mecane is beneath our city? What if she's at the bottom? Farah looked at him and said nothing. She unwound her long scarf and dropped it into the hole. The black swallowed it, and there was silence. She squeezed Atham's hand, and at last smiled. The Emperor stared, unseen, into space. The heresy had dissolved almost as fast as it had begun. His general had done nothing in the end. The historians formed a consensus, based on a unanimous decision to recognize certain early documents as fact. The scientists launched new endeavors, analyzing the minutiae of the soil and determining, conveniently, that a vast concentration of metal lay deep beneath the city. The people returned to the shrines, and the burnt offerings were held aloft once more. The priests were happy. The body politic was solid. The Emperor sat on his throne and stared into nothing, emanating his principality once more. One small matter had caught his attention. A house, a ramshackle thing in the outer suburbs, had disappeared. There was no record of anyone living there, but a neighbor, a man named Atham, had vanished too. The earth was reported to be angry and disturbed. A few leaves were found scattered on the soil. The Emperor wondered if Mecane really was below the city's surface. But then, it hardly mattered.
Interesting. No quote. Huh. Interesting. Okay. So, a tale essentially of a Davite woman who escaped, made her way into Monoram, perhaps maybe infiltrated it purposefully to do this. I don't know. There's a lot. I almost kind of want to watch this video again and go through it again to kind of just review my thoughts on some of this stuff, right? Because it's like you have the whole side of the things where we're not sure if Meccan's really under the city or not, etc. You have Farah, who's maybe she's really a Davite spy, maybe she is an innocent person that just accidentally did some stuff. Didn't seem like it, right? And like, so did she create like vines made of Fulad? Is that what that indicates? Because she liked weaving metal, you know? And so like, is all the metal they found underneath the city at the bottom there, after those vines dug a hole down to the ground, right? Like, is that the vines taking root and putting more, like planting more Fulad down there essentially and spreading? Is that actually Meccan? If Meccan's down there, did the roots take hold of Meccan? And now there's Davite influence in Meccan? Is Meccan corrupted? That would be kind of interesting, right? Because there's also that story of, you know, one of the Church of the Broken God tales that ties in with the Ouroboros cycle, where a faction kind of creates like a false heart and creates this kind of monstrous machine deity that kind of runs wild, you know, for a certain time until it's able to be destroyed. So I wonder if potentially that could tie in with that in some kind of way in this canon, right? Where, you know, maybe instead of, maybe these vines end up corrupting, you know, Meccan in a certain way and it runs wild. You know, I don't know. Just would be interesting. So yeah, I almost kind of want to watch this again to kind of re-go over some of the subtle little things. But an interesting tale. And yeah, I guess the kind of big question is that, like, is Meccan really down there then? Which seems to be the case from the previous video and from what he, you know, the Emperor knows from his previous knowledge. But, you know, if Fulad is a little bit more of a scarce resource, I guess, you know, maybe at one point in time they used up what was left of Meccan and then the vines rooted down there made more Fulad, you know? I don't know. I guess it's one of those things that maybe could be left open to interpretation as to where that's going. Or maybe in future videos, you know, in this series, we'll get enlightened a little bit more. But yeah, that was Burnt Offerings and a Monoram Tale by the Exploring series. So links down below, as always, in the description to the original video in this playlist, without my commentary and reaction into the Exploring series channel. So if you enjoyed this video of his, please be sure to go over there, give it a like, give the man a sub if you're not subbed to him already. Show him some love and support. He definitely deserves it. You know, if you've been around the channel for a while and want to take your support to the next level, there is a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube memberships that I offer. So check all that stuff out. And yeah, if you enjoyed, you know, my reaction and commentary of this video, you know, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and the channel grow. It lets me and the YouTube algorithm know that you enjoy these kind of videos and you want to see some more. So thank you guys for taking the time. You know, if you're still watching here at the very end, appreciate it. Appreciate you guys taking the time out of your busy day to do so. And I hope you're having a good day. And we'll see you guys in the next one.